All right, here we go. We're lecturing on lecture 1, unit number 2, which is on colonization. There we go, starting off with the Europeans setting sail. This is about the Europeans coming to America and, in a way, discovering it and discovering how it's worth money for them. It's a huge, with the resources available, it's a huge moneymaker for them. So you have the Vikings, we've already looked at that. We have the Portuguese, which is a little, right here, a peninsula on the end, which Spain. Portugal comes over, their leader is a man named Prince Henry the Navigator. He develops a GPS-like system called the astrolabe, which charts where sailors are at nighttime using stars. We have similar devices like that on the Apple devices. They use that to sail at nighttime and be accurate as to where they go. They also develop a new type of sailboat called a caravel, which sails against the wind using its triangular-like sails. So the Portuguese are one of the first groups to get to America to start to colonize. And when they do, they bring with them sometimes slaves, and if you look up here, it shows you the map, going from Europe down to Africa to pick up slaves through force, through trading, through whatever reasons, and bringing them to the colonies here in America. Scooting down, you have the Spanish, whose three main goals, or Europeans' three main goals at the time, for discovering America or for using this exploration to colonize, is that you have the spread of Christianity beyond Europe. So you have the Roman Catholic Church with the Pope kind of telling people you should get out, colonize, because this new area, this new world, has millions of Indians who could be turned into Christians or from the Roman Catholic Church. So that's the God part. Now the glory part comes in with the idea that as you expand your empire, so if you look at this map, Portugal's a tiny little part of this peninsula, but yet they can expand their empire and have huge colonies over here and become a more glorious country in the scope of the world. And Portugal, because of their sailors, becomes one of the largest, most important empires in the world at the time, as well as Spain. So that's the glory part. The last part is, of course, becoming rich. When the Europeans get to America, they find resources that are worth lots of money back in Europe, and they also find gold, which is amazing. And when they find this gold, it's great for them, and it makes them tons of money. So the idea now with colonizing in America becomes mercantilism. That's their version of economics. And the goal is to always increase the amount of money in your country by creating a favorable balance of trade for yourself, meaning you bring in, as the country, you bring in more money than you spend. So that's an important thing, especially if you're here in America today. We're terrible at this idea. We are spending more than we actually bring in. That's why we're in debt to ourselves. But in the future, when you get credit cards, you want to make sure that you are not spending too much or you're overspending what you do not have to make. And if so, your items get repossessed or repoed. On the bottom here, which thanks to Apple products, Apple and Steve Jobs, if this moved up, it would say Amerigo Vespucci, who you know his story of getting named after, our continent's named after him. And then you'd have Ferdinand Magellan, who's right behind this map, who's a Portuguese sailor whose crew, not him, he dies on this trip, but his crew circumnavigates or travels around the world in 1522. It took them 3 years, and they go around both the African and South American continent to get all the way around. So congratulations to them for getting around the world. Now the Columbian Exchange is next. Now this is an after product of the Europeans coming to America. It is named after Christopher Columbus. It's a transfer of plants, animals, disease between the Europeans and Americans. Now that they've met each other and that they're using each other for good or bad purposes, they are going to exchange goods for the good of the world in a way. And you have, in this case, good things being traded, like the European diets. The Europeans actually get healthier during this time because of the new fruits and vegetables they're bringing back from the Americas. The Spanish as well are bringing over horses. Horses did not exist in the New World, in the Americas, until this cultural exchange in a way. So in a way, good times for the Columbian Exchange. At the same time, it's sometimes bad, and when you look at why it's bad, it's that the Europeans bring with them sickness and disease. And we're just blowing your nose or coughing with the fact that smallpox and pneumonia exists with the Europeans and their bodies fight it off because of their immune systems. The Native Americans cannot. Their bodies just cannot fight that off. So within a couple-year period, the Native Americans are starting to be wiped out by disease. Disease is killing them, whether it's smallpox, which is the #1 killer, or pneumonia or the flu or any other disease that the Europeans bring over. But the Native Americans are just not ready to fight that off. Down here you have Spain now. We're going to concentrate on Spain for a little. Spain building their empire. Spain brings to the New World conquistadors, which means to conquer through force. And the conquistadors look like this man right here, Hernando Cortez. Top to bottom armor, looks impressive. And the Aztecs, who over here are pretty much wearing nothing but maybe like some leather thongs and some sandals. It looks not as impressive. So that's just their technology. The Europeans come over, and when they get there, in this case the Spanish conquistadors get to the New World, they get to Mexico. And when they're in Mexico, they're going to meet and in a way take over the largest population of Indians as an empire, which is the Aztec Empire. And the Aztecs are a very good warlike group, but the conquistadors take them over pretty easily over a 2-year span. And what happens is Cortez and his 508 total men destroy thousands of Indians inside the capital city and millions of people as a whole, which is 2 large battles basically. The Spanish come in and are basically let in the city. Going back to the Phoenician article you read, the Phoenicians had visited years before, and the Aztecs made big giant statues to represent them, thinking that they were a new god, or that the new conquistadors, when they showed up, that these were the gods their statues had been made of. So the Aztecs let them in their city, and when they're inside their city, the conquistadors figure out, hey, like, we're let in with no fighting. They start to, in a way, fight once the drawbridges are brought up and the capital city is surrounded by water. And within a couple year period, the conquistadors fight off the Aztecs. It's kind of a large battle. They capture Montezuma, who after a couple months of not fighting and being held for ransom pretty much for the gold, their own people, the Aztecs, realize, hey, there's plenty more of us than the conquistadors, and they push the conquistadors out, killing Montezuma in the process. The people, the Aztecs, kill their own emperor, and they say that his blood tainted the water of Mexico. And that's why today, if you go to Mexico and you drink the water, if you get sick, it's called Montezuma's revenge. There's the reasons why it's so easy for the Spanish to come back after a year or two and take over, is that they have better weapons and soldiers. 2 years after they're kicked out, they come back in, and most of the Aztecs are dead from disease, which is the #1 reason why it's so easy to fight them. They also get alliances with local tribes who the Aztecs had bullied over years. They thought the Spanish were gods, and the Spanish had better weapons and soldiers. The next story, which is Francisco Pizarro, he takes over one of the second largest Indian groups, which are the Inca Indians in Peru and South America. Same story as above with Cortez. They come in, disease helps wipes them out. You get this nice little picture showing the conquistadors killing off the Native Americans, and then you have this gentleman in the corner who's, of course, all about God. And it's God's right that they are here trying to make the Native Americans into Christians, and if not, they have to die. Now, because the Spanish are successful in making tons of money in the New World, there are more rumors that there are golden cities because the Incas and Aztecs provided the Spanish with pounds and pounds of gold, millions and millions of dollars. So you have more Spanish explorers and other countries sending explorers to find this gold. You have a man named Hernando de Soto, who is one of the first Europeans in the Mississippi River. We say he discovered it. You have Francisco Coronado, who discovers, in a way, the Grand Canyon looking for gold. And you have this guy's amazing name. You have Alvar Nunez Cabeza de Vaca. His last name literally translates to head of a cow. So he does not really have a cow head, though. That would be awkward. But he writes, after seeing what we're doing to the Native Americans in America, he writes that the Spanish are treating the natives terribly and that they're killing them off with disease. And he actually uses the rest of his life to push for better treatment for the natives. And in a way, he'll help turn slavery into an African problem, because the Africans are then treated as slaves and brought over to be slaves, whereas the Native Americans are kind of forgotten based on the fact they're all dying off from disease. There's the New Spanish World. You have New Spain up here in Central America and Peru down here. It's broken up much like our states, with a viceroyalty is like a state, with a viceroy or mayor in charge. If you lived there, you had an encomienda, or a grant from the king, to get labor or slaves and tax on your plantation. You had huge, giant farms that were made to make money. These plantations needed to be sending gold back or cash crops, making money, of course, for Spain. You had missions set up, which was a giant community or city, almost city size, with a church in the middle, forcing religion in a way on the Native Americans, basically telling the natives, believe in God or your punishment is pretty simple. The beginnings of slavery in the Americas comes with the fact that the Indians are dying out from disease and overwork. They turn to Africans, just like this trader out here again, Europeans going to Africa, to take the Africans over to America and use them as slaves. And there are the 4 reasons, A, B, C, and D, that Africans are immune from the diseases wiping out the Indians, that the Africans, their families are being broken up, so you don't have anywhere to run to if you try to escape. They're a permanent source of labor, millions of people in Africa at the time, and that the Africans are used to farming the same crops from Europeans, but they're going to do that here in America now. Now, this whole process is called the African diaspora, which is the forced removal of Africans to the Americas. Part of this passage or triangular trade route, which is right here, this part over here from Africa to America is called the Middle Passage, which was a 4 to 6 week long boat journey where the slaves, like you see down here, were almost chained together, usually below deck. If the person next to you died after a day or two, they were unchained and thrown overboard, where the sharks would actually follow the pattern of the boats because they were fed so often. You were fed maybe a handful of like oatmeal or food and sprayed with water to survive. During the process, if you had to go to the bathroom as a slave, you just went and then you laid in it until hopefully the deck hands up top cleaned up down where you were below deck. Once you got to America, if you survived the journey, you became a slave, which was probably no better than dying along the process. And this process goes on for 400 years here in America. And you'll have lots of racism and prejudice coming out of this. But you have, because of the need for wealth in the New World and the need for Spanish wealth or European wealth as a whole, the slaves are brought over to do that work, that manual labor that they couldn't get anyone else to do, and they couldn't afford to pay anyone else to do that. So because of the lack of technology in Africa at the time, that's the ability for the Europeans to come over and pretty much steal or kidnap their people to bring to the New World. Hopefully you went over your lecture, paid attention, took some notes if you needed to. Don't forget the notes are available on your Schoology website.